I was 25 when the contractions began, sharp, relentless waves that stole the air from my lungs. I clutched my stomach, sweat dripping down my face, as I stumbled into the living room where my parents sat glued to the television. "Please," I begged, holding the arm of the couch for balance. "I need to go to the hospital. The baby's coming." My father looked up from his beer just long enough to scowl. "What, right now? You couldn't wait until after the game?" My mother smirked over her wine glass. "Of course she couldn't. Trash always chooses the worst timing." She set her glass down and stood, tilting her head. "Why should we waste our evening driving you? You made this mess. Deal with it yourself. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video." Another contraction tore through me. I nearly collapsed, my knees buckling. "Please, please, just this once. I can't do this alone. It hurts. I need to get to the hospital before—" Dad stood abruptly, grabbed my arm, and shoved me toward the door. "You're not bleeding on our seats. You think we're chauffeurs? You should have thought about that before spreading your legs." I froze in the doorway, shock numbing me even more than the pain. "You'd leave me like this?" My voice cracked, tears burning down my face. Mom's reply was ice cold. "We have better things to do." She slammed the door behind me. The night air hit my face, cold and merciless. I stumbled down the driveway, clutching my stomach, the world spinning around me. Streetlights blurred, each step heavier than the last. My phone had died hours earlier. No taxi, no friend to call. I was alone. The last thing I remember was collapsing onto the roadside, gravel digging into my skin, headlights flashing past as strangers drove by. My cries for help were drowned in the roar of traffic. When I woke, everything was white. The beeping of machines, the sharp smell of antiseptic, the stiff sheets of a hospital bed. A nurse leaned over me, adjusting the monitor on my arm. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You collapsed on the roadside. A passerby called an ambulance. You and your baby are stable." I blinked, my throat raw, my body weak. My baby! I turned my head, panic surging until I saw her, a tiny bundle in a clear bassinet, her chest rising and falling, her face peaceful. Relief crashed over me in a wave so strong I sobbed until my body shook. But underneath the relief was something else, something jagged, something that burned hotter than pain. My parents had left me to die, left their grandchild to die. And when I begged them with every ounce of strength I had, they looked me in the eye and said they had better things to do. As I lay in that hospital bed, holding my baby for the first time, I made a promise. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crawl back like always, begging for scraps of approval. But this time, I wasn't crawling. This time, I'd make sure they were the ones left begging. The weeks after the hospital felt like walking barefoot across glass. Every time I held my daughter, whom I named Hope, I felt two things at once: unshakable love and burning fury. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, her sleepy breaths against my chest, her eyes opening to meet mine as if I were her whole world. She had survived, and that was everything. But when I thought of how close I came to losing her, how I had begged at my parents' door only to be shoved onto the street while they laughed about better things to do, something inside me snapped. They never visited the hospital, not once. The nurses told me no one had called to check in, no family had asked. The ambulance driver, a stranger, had cared more about my life than the people who raised me. I recovered slowly. My body was weak, stitched and aching, but my mind refused to rest. Every night while Hope slept beside me, I replayed that moment. Dad's hand shoving me into the cold, Mom's smirk as she shut the door, their voices dripping with disdain. We had better things to do. They thought I would break, come crawling back with Hope in my arms, begging for help. But the more they starved me of care, the stronger my determination became. I started small. I accepted every ounce of kindness from strangers. A neighbor dropped off formula when she heard about my situation. I thanked her but tucked away the memory of Mom rolling her eyes when I once asked for milk. A kind nurse checked in on me, reminding me of what family was supposed to be. Each act of compassion reminded me exactly what my parents weren't: Meanwhile, they carried on with their pride parade. I overheard whispers in town when I went out for groceries, how my parents had been bragging about Jessica, my younger sister, landing a job interview, how they hosted poker nights and bridge clubs like nothing had happened. They never mentioned me, never mentioned Hope. It was like we didn't exist. But their silence wasn't protection. It was arrogance, and arrogance was always the first crack. One afternoon, I gathered enough strength to visit their house, not for reconciliation, but to look them in the eyes. I carried Hope in her stroller, her soft breaths steady as we reached the porch. Mom opened the door, surprise flickering across her face before her smile sharpened into cruelty. "Well," she said, arms crossed, "look who survived." Dad's voice rumbled from behind her. "Thought the hospital would teach you your place. Guess they'll save anyone these days." I kept my face blank, but inside, the rage roared. "Hope wanted to meet her grandparents," I said flatly. Mom leaned closer, peering at the sleeping baby. "Parasite looks just like you." Dad chuckled, shaking his head. "Let's hope she learns to be useful. Otherwise, she'll end up trash too." They thought their words could pierce me. They thought they could reduce me to the broken girl who once cried in their hallway, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I left without another word, but I promised myself it wouldn't end there. That night, as Hope stirred and I soothed her back to sleep, I realized something. Revenge didn't have to be loud at first. Revenge could be quiet, calculated, patient. I started documenting everything. Their insults, their neglect, the way they pretended to the world that they were respectable, upstanding citizens, pillars of the community. I wrote down Mom's words, Dad's jabs. I saved receipts of every kindness given to me by strangers, proof that love and care could exist, but not from them. And then, the opportunity came like a gift. My parents had been chosen to host the neighborhood's annual dinner, a self-congratulatory gathering where they flaunted their perfect family. I overheard Mom bragging at the store, "Everyone will see how proud we are of Jessica. They'll see what success looks like." They were so focused on their pride, they didn't realize they had handed me the stage. They had left me on the roadside in labor. They had abandoned me when I begged for help. They had called my daughter a parasite, smirked while she gasped, and treated me like dirt. Now, I would make sure that when the neighborhood gathered in their home, they would choke on their own lies. They wanted pride? I would feed them shame. And this time, the whole world would see it. The neighborhood dinner came 2 months later, and my parents' house had never looked shinier. Mom scrubbed the floors until they gleamed, laid out her precious china, and polished every wine glass like it was a crown jewel. Dad fussed over the grill outside, telling anyone who'd listen how he'd provide the finest feast. Jessica, their golden girl, paraded through the house, rehearsing her lines for her new job, smiling smugly at every compliment. They had no idea I was already there, in the background, quiet as ever, carrying Hope on my hip. They hadn't invited me, of course. They wouldn't risk trash ruining their perfect evening, but I didn't need an invitation. I had been waiting for this moment since the night they shoved me into the cold, leaving me to collapse on the roadside while Hope fought for her first breath. The guests arrived in clusters, neighbors, Dad's boss, Mom's bridge club, Jessica's colleagues. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the rooms. My parents glowed, their smiles stretching wide, their eyes glittering with pride. Dad eventually took the microphone they'd set up near the dining room archway. His voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. We are so proud to share our home, our family, and of course, our shining star, Jessica." He gestured toward my sister, who held up a glass like she was royalty. The applause was loud, polite, perfect. Exactly the kind of sound my parents fed on. That's when I stepped forward. The crowd shifted as I walked in, holding Hope in my arms. My daughter's big eyes blinked at the lights, her tiny hand clutching my shirt. Whispers spread. Some knew me, some didn't, but everyone recognized the tension. Dad's face darkened instantly. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, dangerous. Mom hissed, "This is not your night. Leave before you embarrass yourself." I didn't move. I didn't blink. Instead, I lifted the small tablet I had hidden in my bag, connected it to the projector they'd prepared for Jessica's slideshow, and pressed play. The room went quiet. On the screen flashed audio clips I had recorded. Mom's cold laugh. Better she dies now than later. One less parasite to feed. Gasps echoed through the hall. Heads turned sharply toward my mother, whose face drained of color. Then came Dad's voice, cruel and slurred. "You think we're chauffeurs? You should have thought of that before spreading your legs." The silence that followed was deafening. The words hung in the air like poison, undeniable and raw. "Is this some kind of trick?" Mom stammered, her voice cracking. "She's twisting it." But then the footage rolled again, louder, clear as day, their words against their own grandchild, against me. Guests covered their mouths. Dad's boss rose slowly from his chair, glaring at him. "So this is who you really are." The bridge club ladies shook their heads, muttering, "Monsters." Jessica's colleagues whispered to each other, some pulling out their phones, recording every second. Jessica stumbled forward, trying to salvage something. "This is all taken out of context. My parents didn't mean—" But I stepped in front of her, my voice steady and sharp. "They meant every word. The night I went into labor, I begged them to take me to the hospital." My father shoved me out the door. My mother told me they had better things to do. I collapsed on the roadside. A stranger saved me and my child, not them. Never them. I turned slightly, letting the room see Hope, healthy and alive in my arms. They called her a parasite. They laughed while she gasped. But she's here because strangers cared more than her own blood. The weight of my words crushed the room. People shifted uncomfortably, glaring at my parents. Dad's boss shook his head in disgust. "I don't ever want to see you in my shop again." Mom lunged for the projector, desperate, shrieking, "This isn't fair! She's making us look bad!" But it was too late. No one saw them as proud hosts anymore. No one saw Jessica as a shining star. They saw exactly what I wanted them to see, the truth. Neighbors whispered. Phones kept recording. Their perfect image, the mask they had built for years, cracked and fell apart in a single evening. "Dad shouted for order," Mom begged. Jessica cried, but their voices were drowned out by the murmurs of disgust spreading through the hall. They had wanted applause. They got shame. I adjusted Hope on my hip and stepped toward the door. My daughter leaned against me, her warm little breath steady, safe. As I walked out, I heard one guest mutter what I had been waiting for. "They're the parasites, not her, not that child." And in that moment, I smiled. They had left me on the roadside to die. Tonight, I left them in the dirt they created, begging for dignity, while the world watched and turned away. And I didn't look back. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.